In this video, I'm going through 5 simple things you can do today that significantly increase your chance of going viral. But first, hi, I'm Danny. I've been a writer and creator for the last 8 years. I grew my last content business to a point where I was getting millions of views a month and generating 6 figures in revenue. But then it all basically fell apart because of an algorithm update and a shadow ban. So now I'm trying to rebuild by sharing what I've learned over the years. I really appreciate you being here. If you get any value from this video, please consider liking and following. So there's a myth in content creation that going viral is all about luck. The reality is you can do several things that stack the odds in your favor. And to illustrate them, I want to go through a Threads post that I saw yesterday. It's from a guy called Hid Doula, who's built a really big following around his brand called Growth by Visuals. So it goes, they removed my watermark, added theirs, 450,000 likes. I was furious for 3 days. Then I realized if my work is good enough to steal and go viral, it's good enough to sell. I created an online shop that weekend. Same visuals, high-res files, $9.99 a piece. Posted, if you've seen my work floating around with credit, here's where to get the real thing. Made my first ever money online, best feeling ever. Turns out theft is just unpaid market research. PS, the stealing didn't stop. So when I first saw that post, it had about 2,000 likes. And then as you can see, it's now at well over 50,000 views, 4,000 likes and 153 comments. So while that might not sound like crazy virality, by Threads standards, it's really up there. I recently went through literally thousands of Threads posts to assemble this Notion doc full of Threads outliers, so posts that went particularly viral on the platform. You can actually get that down below in the description if you want it. You'll notice that most of the high-performing posts have around 1,000 to 2,000 likes. And so to get 4,000 likes from 50,000 views is actually super impressive. This isn't really that surprising because he's done 5 things really well that in my experience are almost always present in viral posts. And so that's what we're going to go through now. So number 1, the hook sets up a payoff. So I think everyone watching this will know how important their hooks are, but it's much harder to know how to create a good one. We know that a hook is key, but how do you actually create a good hook? What goes into it? Hid has done a few things really well here. So the first line is short, punchy, and sharp. So he hasn't worried about perfect grammar or anything like that. The basic outcome is that the hook is really easy to consume. If as a creator you can approach content as if you're really respecting the time and attention that people are giving you to consume your content, I think that's going to stand you in good stead. And so you'll find in general that the posts with the most reach and engagement are ones where it's really effortless to consume the content. The important point here is that that doesn't necessarily equate to impact and meaning. If you're trying to sell something, especially something that's high ticket and you want a particular type of client, sometimes adding a bit of friction there functions as a kind of qualifier, because the sort of people you want to work with will be those who are willing to read through something that's a bit more effortful. In general, the fact that they're willing to do that implies they're going to be a better client. Here we're talking about virality, so we're talking about ways to maximize reach. And there's no doubt that the best way to do that is to make your content as frictionless to consume as possible. And this is particularly true for online writing, because obviously with writing, there's no movement, there's no sound, there's nothing else to grab people's attention. So the only tool you have to grab people is the writing that they're seeing on the screen. So the content itself, the words you use are important, the meaning you get across is key, but how they look and sound in people's head is key too. So secondly, there's a number in the hook here. So when you include numbers, you're more likely to get better results. I imagine it's something to do with the change from going from letters to numbers, where that contrast is going to be another tool that grabs people's attention. There's also something kind of concrete and reassuring about a number. Same with like a statistic or a fact. Humans are naturally risk averse and we don't like uncertainty. There's something kind of psychological about the certainty of a number, which makes it more appealing. But the really big thing here that makes this a great hook is that it sets up a payoff. So the short, punchy style of the hook combined with the message, it grabs your attention, but it also creates tension. So it grabs your attention, but it creates tension. We don't like tension, it's an uncomfortable sensation. And so naturally we feel an urge to resolve it. So here you feel a sense of tension having read that first line. And the only way to resolve it is to keep reading. It makes you want to carry on down through the post to find out what happened. And so resolve the tension that you felt having engaged with the hook. It makes me think of a lesson from the copywriter called Joseph Sugarman. He basically said that the primary job of any writer, any copywriter, is to get people to read the first line. And so the goal of your heading, subheading, if you have them, is to get people to that first line. And then the goal of the first line is to get people to read the second line. And then the goal of the second line is to get them to read the third line, and so on and so forth. If you do that successfully, you create this waterfall effect where people are naturally drawn from the start of your post or your content through to the end of it. Because ultimately, that's the goal. The longer people spend watching or consuming your content, the more the algorithm is going to reward it. You're going to get more reach. And so if you can pull people through your content, naturally, they're going to spend longer on it. And so the algorithms will reward you, and it's all going to feed into that virality. And so back to Hid's post, he's made it really easy to read that first line by ignoring things like perfect grammar, using incomplete sentences, and he's created that tension we just talked about, which makes you want to resolve it. And the only way to do that is to keep reading. And so it's just a great example of that waterfall effect, which is going to boost the read time, boost the time on post, which the algorithm is going to take notice of and reward by pushing it out to more people. Another thing to mention here with the hook is that it's emotionally charged. So you read that first line and it's full of emotion. And this leads us on to a second thing you can do to increase your chance of going viral. So number 2 is emotionality. So the most successful posts in terms of reach, as well as getting leads and sales, actually, in my opinion, pack a significant emotional charge. They make you feel something. So the emotion itself matters less than the fact it elicits emotion in the first place. And I'll explain why in a second, but let's read that first line again. They removed my watermark, added theirs, 450,000 likes. So it packs this kind of sense of frustration and unfairness and unease. And then the line below it, I was furious for 3 days. Again, it's emotion. Furious is a power word. He's not just angry or very upset. He's furious. It's a kind of word you read and you feel. And this is kind of reinforced by those short sentences. So he's not just telling us he's angry with that word. He's showing us he's frustrated. He's showing us he's furious with those short sentences that create that sense of frustration. You can empathize with what's happened here. And that word empathy is a really key part of going viral. If people can relate to the topic or the story you're telling, you have a really, really high chance of your post performing well. It's one of 2 core traits at the center of any viral content: relatability and shareability. If you feel something, naturally it makes you want to A, keep consuming it. You may even watch it again. But it also naturally lends itself to getting engagement, whether that's likes or a comment or a share. This speaks to a key point in terms of the relatability and shareability. Basically, anything that is shareable tends to be relatable, but not everything that is relatable is shareable. So a good example of that might be a medical issue. You might watch a post that details a medical issue that you think you might have, but especially if it's something embarrassing, you wouldn't want to share it necessarily. If it's something curious or strange or in any way amusing, that changes. But if it's something you're relating to that you wouldn't necessarily want other people to know about, you're not likely to share it. And so some viral posts are relatable and shareable, others are just relatable. But the emotion with Hid's post isn't just any emotionality. The charge behind it has kind of a negative slant because he's talking about something provocative, and this kind of leads us into point 3. So a quick story. This is my most viral post ever. It's a simple text and image post about the Faroe Islands, but it went absolutely bonkers. Ended up getting 50,000 engagements and millions of views. And it quickly became apparent just how contentious the Faroe Islands are because of the annual whale hunt that happens there. So I knew about that tradition, but for whatever reason when I was writing this post, I just hadn't connected the dots. That blunder actually contributed to the virality of this post, because at one point in the copy, I wrote this, like, animals love it there too. I lost count of how many people chimed in the comments saying something like, oh, but the whales don't love it, do they? Or something along those lines. So whale hunting, it's clearly a provocative topic, but moreover, it's polarizing. And together, when you get a provocative topic that's polarizing, you have a really potent combination for driving engagement. And that's exactly what happened here. So the comment section on this post flooded, with people on one side berating the brutality of this tradition, and others pointing out things like it being a long-held tradition and so on. And so obviously you see a lot of creators kind of gaming the system here. So even though for me it was a total accident, other people really lean in to that polarizing nature of things to try and stimulate the conversation, stimulate the comments, and go viral that way. This is the one that I have most reservations about. Like the idea of purposefully baiting an audience doesn't really sit well with me. And also, there are ways to do this in a much less negative. So, Hid's post is a good example of that because it's provocative, but it's not polarizing. It's all about theft of artwork and copyright infringement. And so it was bound to stir people up on social media. I think, especially on a platform like Threads, which is full of artists and creators and writers, people with a very vested interest in not being plagiarized. And again, note the relatability here. All of us, especially if you're a creator, can empathize and relate to the frustration of working hard on something that someone else then rips off, takes credit for, and monetizes without our permission. And so again, it lends itself to those likes and comments and shares. And then on the topic of comments, we're going to get on to point number 4, which is that replying to comments on your own viral post can facilitate that post's virality. So if you look at the comments on Hid's post, I think he replied to most, if not all of them. Although this is more of a personal observation than something I absolutely know to be true. In my own experience as a creator and having gone viral multiple times, from what I've seen, algorithms see your own comments, your own responses to other people's comments on your post as additional engagement. So again, it means they push your post out even further. Another thing to keep in mind is that in those comments, if you're stimulating conversation, if you're kind of asking questions or clarifying what someone means or just continuing the conversation, you're going to get them to comment even more. So as well as just having an actual human interaction with someone, those additional comments will also get picked up by the algorithm, which will then spin your post out to a wider audience again. However, emotionally charged content, provocative content, commenting on your own post definitely isn't the only way to get engagement on your content. One other way you can do it leads us into number 5, which is storytelling. Everything else we've talked about aside, the big reason Hid's post did so well here and went so viral on Threads is because he told us a story. So stories are an underutilized weapon among creators. It's really hard to overstate how powerful they are, both in terms of forging connections with an audience, but also in terms of getting a point across and helping people abstract the information packaged within it to actually help your tips or insights land. There's an emotional resonance to stories that naturally makes them more memorable and helps whatever insights or message you're trying to deliver land among the people receiving them. So at a very basic level, we like being told stories. We naturally gravitate towards them. And done well, a good story makes you want to find out what happened and ultimately get to the end, which, like we were saying before, is basically the goal of any content creator. And so this is exactly what Hid has done. And what's super impressive here is that he's packaged it all into just over 400 words, I think, but it contains a full story arc. He's not just recounting an event, he's telling us about the transformation that he underwent as a result of it. He told us where he was, that negative start point, someone stole his work, and then he leads us in a few lines to where he ended up, which was the positive outcome, him setting up the online store and making money. And it speaks to contrast a bit. That contrast is compelling. It also resolves the tension that he set up at the beginning of the post in his hook. Another thing that Hid did well here is that he took that negative experience and framed it as a positive. He could have just posted about the copyright infringement and the fact that his work got stolen and moaned about it, and he would have got some likes and some comments underneath it with people commiserating with him. But by waiting a bit and turning that experience into a positive and sharing how it turned out and then framing his post around that transformation, he protects and raises his status. This piece around status, it's something that doesn't get talked about a huge amount. If you're trying to build a brand and sell a product or sell a service at the other end of it, having high perceived status in the market is a huge deal. In general, you're unlikely to listen to someone or buy from someone who you see as lower status than you. So doing things like complaining and criticizing and moaning on social media doesn't do anything to help that. So while I'm not saying don't vent and don't be yourself and don't be authentic and express how you feel on social media, that's not what I think at all. It's just worth being aware of the impact that can have on your status. And so if you can do what Hid did and try and turn that negative into a positive somehow, whether that's just sharing the insight or sharing how you overcame it alongside the initial emotion, then I think that's going to be beneficial long term. So that brings these 5 tips on how to go viral to an end. I hope this has been useful. If you nail your hooks, reducing friction for your audience and setting up payoffs that make them want to lean in and keep consuming. If you lean into the emotionality and relatability of your content, if you can spark and encourage engagement and package the whole thing in a story, then you have a really high chance of going viral, or if nothing else, increasing the results you get in your content. However, before you can create a winning post, you need a winning idea. Watch this video next, where I show you how I find, capture, and develop proven content ideas that I know have a high chance of getting results online.